Now, do you remember what the conversation was like between you and Nick when you decided to rob Orlando Bloom's house? Like, how did that go down? Is it because I'm sure when you're at that age, it seems more like a funny thing to do, and then
Well, it wasn't funny.
no, it's not a funny thing to do, but you did it, so it's kind of like, oh, let's just do this.
Yeah. So, I I knew what was going down, but I wasn't involved in like the planning of what was going down. And the reason I agreed to go is because honestly, I was a junkie who needed drug money,
Mm.
and I didn't have access to funds at the time. We hadn't started filming, and my addiction had gotten really bad. And I had been kicked out of my parents' house because I could not show up sober. And I was a nightmare. My poor mom, I can't imagine having to deal with your daughter when she's strung out on heroin and Xanax and alcohol. It's
Yeah.
not fun. I was disappearing all hours of the night, and you know, it was not good. Um, and I just totally got off track. What was the question? I don't know how
Uh,
I just
No, it was about
lost.
the conversation that took place before it happened. But I'd imagine
Oh,
you
yes.
you saying that you were going through addiction
Yeah.
and all of that had to be
Take
kind
the
of
money.
yeah, take the money. You'll do whatever it takes. Kind of has to be frustrating when you see the way it's represented in a movie or
Yeah.
everywhere else, and you're like, they don't really know what I was really going through or why I made these decisions because you were dealing with like a severe addiction.
Well, that's the nuance that was lacking that I was talking about.
Yeah.
Like, crime doesn't happen in a vacuum. Addiction doesn't happen in a vacuum. It doesn't just happen because one day you decide to, take
Mm.
part in a crime. Like, everyone has a motivating factor, and all of our motivating factors were different. I can only speak to mine. Um, you know, this is kind of where Nick and my viewpoints, and granted, I was under the influence. At this point, I don't need to save face. I'm owning the fact that,
Yeah.
like, I robbed Orlando Bloom's house, and like I was going to parties and jacking money from, like, I was
Yeah.
a piece of shit human. Like, I'm here to like fully own that. Um, you know, uh, this is kind of where there's this point of contention between the two of us. Um, and so I will just say this, that like I knew what I was doing, but I wasn't involved with like the planning of that. The planning happened between Nick and Rachel. They planned every other robbery. I just showed up that night.
Yeah.
And I was a willing participant. No one held a gun to my head, and I made that decision, and it's a decision that I feel awful about. I don't have any regrets because it was the thing that ended up saving my life. But obviously, that shouldn't have been at the expense of another individual. And so, yeah, and in the documentary, Nick, he says that, him and Rachel had, during the planning of this, they said that they were going to basically keep and set aside, and somehow I don't know if they went to the house beforehand. That's the other thing too, because I know they robbed these houses on multiple nights, but essentially that there was going to be nothing left for me, that they were going to take all of the Rolexes and all of the expensive things and keep them for themselves. And so it's kind of like, well, what is it, Nick? Like, you're saying that I was involved in all of the planning and I knew all of the things, but here you are also saying that like you and Rachel had this plan in advance, and that you had this ulterior motive. And so yeah, I took part in the robbery. I specify in the documentary what I took and the reason why, and I'm fully owning it.